Andrew sat at the small wooden table in his modest kitchen, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. The numbers blurred together as he rubbed his temples, trying to silence the gnawing ache in his chest. It had been years since the accident, years since he left the competitive world of horse training behind. Back then, he had everything: prestige, success, and a future filled with promise. But one misstep during a high-stakes competition changed all of that. The memory haunted him: the deafening sound of a horse's hooves faltering, the sharp cries of the crowd, and the crushing realization that he had pushed too hard, too fast. The accident left the horse injured and Andrew plagued with guilt. He couldn't bring himself to stay in the industry that had once defined him. So, he retreated to a quiet town, hoping the stillness would bring peace. In his solitude, Andrew found an unexpected lifeline: valor. The horse had been a shadow of himself when Andrew first saw him at the rescue shelter. His ribs jutted out beneath a dull coat, and his eyes held a wariness that spoke of pain and betrayal. Andrew knew that look too well. He saw it every time he looked in the mirror. Rescuing Valor felt like rescuing a piece of himself. Slowly, with patience and care, he helped Valor regain his strength and trust. In return, Valor gave Andrew a sense of purpose he thought he'd lost forever. They became inseparable, each finding solace in the other's presence. Valor's resilience reminded Andrew that healing was possible, even after the deepest wounds. But no amount of healing could erase the weight of Andrew's financial struggles. The bills piled up faster than he could pay them, and the small odd jobs he took barely kept the lights on. The thought of losing Valor haunted him. How could he let go of the one being who had been there for him when he had nothing left? Andrew sighed heavily, glancing out the window toward the small paddock where Valor grazed. As if sensing Andrew's gaze, the horse lifted his head, his ears twitching. A flicker of guilt gnawed at Andrew's heart. Then came the offer. A wealthy buyer, known for his extravagant estate and prized horses, had expressed interest in Valor. The sum he offered was more than Andrew could dream of earning in a year. It was a way out, a chance to get back on his feet. But the thought of Valor leaving his life felt like another wound too deep to bear. Andrew wrestled with the decision, his thoughts a storm of desperation and loyalty. He told himself that maybe Valor would be better off in a luxurious estate, with a life of comfort and care. But deep down, he couldn't shake the fear that he'd be betraying the trust they had built. As the days passed, the decision loomed larger, casting a shadow over every moment. Andrew couldn't help but wonder if his bond with Valor would survive this test, or if he'd lose the only constant in his life. Andrew leaned against the doorway of his small barn, the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders. In his hands, he clutched a stack of overdue bills, each one a reminder of the financial noose tightening around his neck. He had tried everything: freelance horse training, odd jobs in town, even selling a few possessions, but it was never enough. His eyes drifted to Valor, grazing peacefully in the paddock. The horse moved with an elegance that spoke of untapped greatness. Andrew had poured his heart into saving Valor, pulling him from the brink when no one else would. But now, the very thought of losing him to circumstances beyond his control filled Andrew with despair. As the days passed, the pile of bills seemed to grow taller. Andrew's desperation deepened with every passing moment. The idea of selling Valor crept into his mind, uninvited and unwelcome. He hated himself for even considering it, but the mounting pressure left him little choice. He paced the small barn, wrestling with the impossible decision. Maybe it's what's best for him, he muttered to himself, though the words felt hollow. Then came the call. An influential horse trader, known for his wealth and extravagant estates, made an offer that Andrew couldn't ignore. The man spoke of lush pastures, luxury stables, and opportunities for Valor to shine. He'll be treated like royalty, the trader assured him. The money was more than Andrew had dared to hope for, a lifeline he desperately needed. But the decision didn't come easily. Andrew spent sleepless nights replaying the trader's promises in his mind, trying to convince himself that this was the right thing to do. Yet every time he looked at Valor, he felt the sting of betrayal. "What kind of man sells his best friend?" he whispered in the dark, his voice choked with emotion. Finally, the day came. With a heavy heart, Andrew led Valor to the horse trailer waiting at the edge of the property. The trader stood nearby, all smiles and handshakes, oblivious to the turmoil in Andrew's heart. As Andrew secured Valor's halter, he pressed his forehead to the horse's. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I hope you understand someday." Valor whinnied softly, as if sensing Andrew's sorrow. And then, just like that, he was gone. Andrew stood frozen as the trailer disappeared down the dirt road, taking a piece of his soul with it. But the pain didn't end there. Days turned into weeks, and Andrew couldn't shake the gnawing guilt. The bills were paid, but the price felt too high. He kept replaying the moment he let Valor go, questioning if he had made the right choice. Meanwhile, Valor struggled in his new home. Used to the gentle care and trust he had with Andrew, he found himself surrounded by unfamiliar faces and routines. The luxurious estate felt cold and empty. Valor paced his stall at night, his restlessness a testament to his unease. Rumors began to circulate. Friends and acquaintances told Andrew that Valor wasn't adjusting well. "He's been acting up," one said. "Won't settle, no matter what they do." Another mentioned sightings of the horse pacing and refusing food. Each report chipped away at Andrew's resolve, filling him with a growing sense of dread. One night, as Andrew sat alone in his quiet home, he stared at a picture of Valor. It was taken on the day they had completed their first trail ride together, both of them brimming with pride. The memories came flooding back, of the bond they had built, the challenges they had overcome together. And suddenly, Andrew knew. The money, the trader's promises, the temporary relief, it all paled in comparison to the connection he had with Valor. The decision he had made, however well-intentioned, felt like a betrayal of everything they stood for. Andrew's chest tightened as a new determination took hold. "I need to fix this," he whispered. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. He didn't know how he would do it, but he was sure of one thing: he couldn't let Valor's story end like this. The wind howled through the stables, shaking the wooden walls as a fierce storm raged outside. Rain lashed against the windows, but Valor didn't flinch. He stood in his stall, his ears pinned back and his eyes locked on the barn door. The longing inside him had grown unbearable. For weeks, he had been trapped in this unfamiliar place, surrounded by strangers who didn't understand him. Every fiber of his being yearned for Andrew, the man who had saved him, nurtured him, and become his only true companion. Something deep within Valor stirred, a primal instinct, an unshakable determination to return to the life he knew. The storm outside didn't scare him, it called to him. With a sudden burst of energy, Valor charged at the gate of his enclosure, his powerful frame testing the latch. Again and again, he ran the gate until it finally gave way with a deafening crack. Without hesitation, Valor bolted into the night, the storm swallowing him whole. His hooves pounded against the muddy ground as he ventured into the unknown, guided only by instinct. The journey ahead was daunting, 500 miles of wilderness, towns, and dangers lay between him and Andrew. But Valor's heart was set. Nothing else mattered. The first night tested his resolve. Freezing rain soaked his coat, and the biting wind cut through him like a knife. The terrain was treacherous, with steep hills and slick, muddy paths. Yet Valor pushed on, his muscles straining with every step. Exhaustion clawed at him, but the thought of Andrew waiting for him kept his spirit alive. The following days brought new challenges. Hungry and weakened, Valor scavenged for food, nibbling on sparse grass and shrubs. He crossed rivers, his legs trembling against the icy currents. He scaled rocky slopes, his hooves slipping dangerously close to the edge. But even as the elements battered him, he refused to stop. Not everyone who saw Valor understood his mission. In a small town, a group of locals spotted him wandering near the outskirts. "That's a runaway horse," one exclaimed, reaching for a rope. Panic surged through Valor as they closed in, their voices loud and unfamiliar. At the last moment, he leapt over a low fence and disappeared into the woods, his heart pounding from the close call. Later, an animal control officer spotted him grazing near a highway. The man approached slowly, holding out a halter. "Easy, boy," he said softly, but Valor sensed the threat. He reared back, his eyes wild, and galloped into the distance, leaving the man behind in stunned silence. Days turned into weeks, and the toll of the journey became evident. Valor's once shiny coat was now matted with mud, and his ribs began to show beneath his skin. His legs ached from endless miles, and a small cut on his flank throbbed with pain. But even as his body weakened, his spirit burned brighter. He could feel it, he was getting closer. Meanwhile, Andrew sat at his kitchen table, staring at the TV in disbelief. A news report flashed on the screen, "Runaway horse spotted near Smithville." The grainy footage showed a brown stallion with a distinct white blaze. It was Valor. Andrew's heart leapt and sank all at once. He had feared this might happen, but seeing it confirmed was like a punch to the gut. Without wasting a second, Andrew grabbed his jacket and car keys. He couldn't sit idly by while Valor braved the world alone. He called the authorities, trying to track Valor's movements, but the leads were few and far between. Each sighting gave him a glimmer of hope, only to be replaced by dread when the trail went cold. The new owner, too, had noticed Valor's escape. Furious and embarrassed, he hired a team to track the horse down. Andrew knew they were closing in, and the thought of Valor being captured and taken back filled him with urgency. He couldn't let that happen, not after everything they'd been through. The days that followed were a race against time. Valor faced his toughest challenges yet, navigating through dense forests, dodging traffic on busy roads, and enduring nights without rest. His body was pushed to its limits, but his determination never wavered. Andrew drove from town to town, following every lead he could find. His worry grew with each passing day. What if Valor didn't make it? What if someone else found him first? The thought of losing Valor again was unbearable. But even in the darkest moments, there was hope. One evening, as Andrew scanned the horizon from his truck, he saw a familiar figure in the distance. It was just a glimpse, a silhouette against the setting sun, but it was enough to reignite his resolve. Valor, too, felt the pull of home growing stronger. Despite his injuries, his hunger, and the relentless obstacles in his path, he pushed forward. With every step, he inched closer to the man who had never given up on him. The stormy night that had set him free seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by a singular focus, returning to Andrew. As he climbed one last hill, his ears flicked forward, and his heart raced. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew he was close. The bond that had guided him through this perilous journey was unbreakable, and nothing could stop him now. As the sun dipped below the horizon, both Andrew and Valor felt it, the promise of a reunion. The road had been long and cruel, but their connection had endured. And as they drew closer, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when their paths would finally cross again. After miles of relentless travel, Valor's strength finally began to wane. The journey had taken its toll on him, he was physically exhausted, weakened by hunger, and drained by the harsh conditions he'd endured. His legs trembled beneath him, his breath shallow, but still, his determination pushed him forward. The sight of Andrew was so close, he could almost feel it, the comfort of home, the warmth of the man who had always believed in him. But as the miles drew near, Valor's body could no longer keep up. His legs gave way, and with a soft whinny, he collapsed onto the ground just a few miles away from Andrew's home. His body was battered and worn, his spirit dimming with each labored breath. The ground beneath him felt cold, unwelcoming, and the storm clouds above seemed to echo his weariness. It was then that a passerby noticed the struggling horse. A middle-aged man, wrapped in the collar of his coat, slowed his truck as he saw the fallen animal. His heart ached at the sight of Valor lying helplessly on the ground. The horse's body was too frail, too worn from the long journey. He parked the truck and approached cautiously, his eyes filled with concern. "Hey there, buddy," he murmured softly, kneeling beside Valor. The man could see the horse's shallow breathing and knew he couldn't leave him there. Without hesitation, he reached for his phone and dialed for help. Within moments, Andrew's phone rang, the sound slicing through the silence of his home. He glanced at the screen. He didn't recognize the number, but the moment he answered, his heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Andrew Wilson," the voice on the other end asked. "I think I've found your horse." Andrew's pulse quickened as he sat up straighter, the weight of the words hitting him. "Valor," he breathed, his voice tight. "Yes. He's in bad shape. You need to get here now. He's just a few miles out." Without a second thought, Andrew grabbed his keys and raced out the door. His mind was a storm of conflicting emotions: hope, fear, anticipation, dread. Was it truly Valor? What condition would he be in? Would he still be alive? As he sped toward the location, his thoughts raced. He pictured the journey, the hardships Valor had endured, and the bond they had shared. How many times had Valor been there for him? How many times had he felt the horse's strength, his unwavering loyalty? Finally, Andrew arrived, his heart pounding in his chest. He spotted Valor lying on the ground, barely conscious, his sides heaving with each shallow breath. The sight of his loyal companion in such a fragile state made Andrew's heart clench with pain. Valor had always been strong, stronger than any horse Andrew had ever known. But now, he looked like a mere shadow of himself. "Valor," Andrew whispered, his voice breaking as he knelt beside the horse. His hands shook as he gently touched the horse's mane, his eyes stinging with tears. Valor's eyes flickered open for a moment, and for a split second, Andrew thought he saw recognition there. Then, the horse collapsed back into unconsciousness, the struggle too much for him. The next few hours were a blur. Andrew stayed by Valor's side, gently coaxing him to drink water, offering him whatever comfort he could. The bond between them had never been clearer. Valor wasn't just a horse to him. He was family. But just as Andrew was beginning to feel the faintest glimmer of hope, the new owner arrived. The man was tall, stern, his expression hardened with impatience. He carried a stack of legal papers, his eyes locked onto Valor. "Is this him?" the man asked coldly, his gaze sweeping over Valor's weakened form. Andrew stood up, stepping between the new owner and his horse. "He's mine," Andrew said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. "He's always been mine." The new owner's lips curled into a thin smile. "The paperwork says otherwise," he replied, flipping open the stack of papers and waving them in the air. "I've got the legal right to reclaim this horse. You've no claim to him anymore." Andrew's chest tightened. He couldn't believe it. After all they'd been through, the bond they shared, this man was going to take Valor away from him. "This horse has been through hell to get here," Andrew said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Valor isn't just any horse. He's my partner. He's my friend. I've spent years building this bond with him. He came back to me, after everything, and I will not let him go." The new owner's gaze hardened. "It's not your decision. The law is clear." Andrew's heart ached as he looked at Valor, still lying weakly on the ground. "This isn't about the law. This is about a bond that can't be broken. Valor came back to me on his own, against all odds. Do you think he's going to be happy with you? Do you think he'll ever trust you the way he trusts me?" The tension in the air was thick, the weight of Andrew's words hanging between them. The new owner didn't respond immediately. He glanced at Valor, who lay motionless but for the rise and fall of his chest. A few local residents, who had been following Valor's journey, began to gather around. They stood in silent support, watching the confrontation unfold. One by one, they spoke up. "That horse belongs with Andrew," one of them said. "We all know it." The sentiment grew, voices rising in a chorus of support. "Let him keep his horse," another added. "He's earned it." As the crowd's voices grew louder, the new owner's expression began to soften. His eyes flicked between Valor and Andrew, the weight of the situation settling on him. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders dropping in defeat. "All right. I see now. Maybe I was wrong." Andrew stood frozen for a moment, unsure if he was hearing things correctly. The new owner handed him the papers, his gaze now devoid of the hostility it once held. "I'll sign the release," the man said quietly. "He belongs with you." Andrew's breath caught in his throat. A wave of relief flooded through him. He bent down to lift Valor's head gently, pressing his face to the horse's mane. "Thank you," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. In that moment, everything changed. Valor was no longer just a horse, he was a symbol of the unwavering bond between man and animal, of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Andrew and Valor had been through the worst together, and now, they had a second chance. As Andrew embraced his companion, the crowd erupted in cheers, their support ringing in the air. For Andrew, it was the culmination of a journey filled with heartache and hope, but most of all, it was a moment of redemption. Together, they would face whatever the future held, knowing that their bond was unbreakable. The days following Valor's reunion with Andrew felt like a dream. Every morning, Andrew would wake up to the sight of Valor standing in the stable, his coat shining and his eyes filled with trust. The bond between them was stronger than it had ever been before. They had both been through so much, separation, fear, danger, and yet, they had found their way back to each other. No one would ever understand the depth of what they had gone through, except for the two of them. Andrew sat in the barn one evening, his hand resting on Valor's neck, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. He thought back to the journey, Valor's relentless trek to find him, the toll it had taken on both of them, and the overwhelming relief when they were finally together again. He had feared losing Valor, feared that the horse he had known and loved might never be the same. But now, as he sat beside him, Andrew realized that their journey had changed them both for the better. It wasn't just about the bond between man and horse. It was about trust, trust in each other, trust in the world, trust that no matter how impossible things seemed, there was always hope. Valor had trusted Andrew enough to fight through pain and exhaustion, to break free from his past life and find his way home. And Andrew had trusted Valor to keep going, even when it seemed like there was no chance left. Andrew took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. He had learned something invaluable through this journey, resilience. The ability to keep moving forward, no matter how hard the path was, no matter how many obstacles seemed insurmountable. Both he and Valor had learned that, and it had made them stronger. As Andrew sat with Valor, the realization hit him, he couldn't just go back to the way things were. He couldn't forget the journey, the lessons, the pain, and the triumph. The world needed to know Valor's story. The world needed to hear about the bond between them, the strength, and the courage. It wasn't just about winning competitions or earning ribbons anymore. It was about something deeper, something that mattered more than any award ever could. Andrew had spent so much of his life competing in the equestrian world. But now, as he sat there, reflecting on everything that had brought him to this moment, he knew his purpose had changed. It was no longer just about proving himself in the arena. It was about advocating for animals like Valor, showing people that they were more than just competitors or property. They were beings with emotions, instincts, and the capacity for incredible loyalty. With a renewed sense of purpose, Andrew made a decision. He would re-enter the equestrian world, not as a competitor, but as an advocate. He would fight for animal welfare, for the rights of horses like Valor, who had shown him that loyalty could transcend everything. He would use his voice, his platform, to raise awareness and to share Valor's incredible story. He would inspire others to see animals as more than just tools for sport, but as companions worthy of love and respect. As the days passed, Andrew and Valor began preparing for something new, something that symbolized their healing and redemption. They were going to host a small charity event, an event that would not only raise funds for animal welfare but also serve as a testament to the bond they shared. It would be a celebration of their journey, their struggles, and their triumphs. The event would allow them to share their story with others, to show the world that healing was possible, that redemption could be found, and that there was always hope, no matter how difficult the road seemed. Andrew and Valor spent their days practicing, not for a competition, but for a cause. Andrew's heart swelled with pride as he watched Valor move with grace, his muscles strong and his spirit unbroken. They weren't just performing for applause or prizes, they were performing for something much bigger than themselves. Every step, every movement, was a reminder of how far they had come, of the battles they had faced, and the love that had brought them through it all. As the day of the charity event drew closer, the excitement in the air was palpable. Local supporters, those who had followed Valor's journey from the very beginning, showed up to offer their support. There was a sense of unity, of shared purpose, as the community rallied around Andrew and Valor. On the day of the event, Andrew stood beside Valor, looking out at the crowd that had gathered to support them. His heart raced, not out of nerves, but out of gratitude. Gratitude for the people who had stood by him, for the bond he shared with Valor, and for the chance to make a difference. He had never felt more alive, more connected to the world around him. Valor nudged him gently, as if reminding him that they were in this together, every step of the way. Andrew smiled and gave him a soft pat on the neck. Together, they were unstoppable. As they performed at the event, the crowd watched in awe. There was no competition, no judges, no prizes. There was only the pure beauty of the connection between Andrew and Valor, the trust, the love, the unwavering commitment they had to each other. It was a moment of healing, a moment of redemption, a moment that would stay with both of them forever. And as the event came to a close, Andrew stood at the front, speaking to the crowd. His voice was steady, but his heart was full. "This," he said, "this is what matters. It's not about trophies or ribbons. It's about the bond we share with the animals in our lives. It's about trust, loyalty, and love. And it's about making sure that animals like Valor get the respect they deserve." The crowd erupted into applause, but for Andrew, the real reward was in the journey he had shared with Valor and the path ahead. Together, they would continue to inspire others, showing that no matter how difficult the journey, there was always hope for healing, redemption, and a second chance. If you enjoyed Andrew and Valor's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales of resilience and hope. Your support helps us share these powerful stories with the world. Hit the bell icon to never miss an update.